Blood supplies are critically low in the Puget Sound region, and so we are joined by Dr. Kirsten Alcorn with Bloodworks Northwest. Doctor, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate that. And I want to dive right in by asking you, when we say blood supplies are critically low, can you describe what that means?
I think that critically low or any other inventory term is really just the same as what about your cupboards, right? What is critically low on toilet paper? Down to your last roll? What's moderately low? You got 2 rolls left? It's really, really similar. So when we talk about being critically low in the blood supply, we're talking about maybe just enough to get through another day. And that's never a comfortable feeling when it comes to blood. What we saw this past weekend is that there could be lots of trauma patients all at once. Unfortunately, those were through violence this weekend, but it adds up, and it could be other things. It could be a car accident where multiple cars or multiple people in any one car could be in a situation where they need transfusion, and nobody ever wants any hospital or any person who becomes a patient to be in the position of showing up, needing that transfusion, and it's maybe not there.
Well, I will get to the concerns over the effects of violence and hospital capacity issues as well in a moment. But the other thing I wanted to make sure to ask you about is because, having done this before, because this is not the first time we have reached low levels in our supply, summertime can often be a difficult time to get donors, can't it?
It certainly is. Anytime that there's a vacation period, people who would normally be in town donating blood at a blood drive, maybe being held near their place of work or school or some other place that they go in the community, or due to an appointment at an actual blood center location. If they're not in town, they're not making that donation. And summertime is when we see that effect over the longest period of time because it's so many weeks, bounded by holidays like Memorial Day and Labor Day. And so it's a real effect. And at the same time, it's the season where a lot of people get out and they're doing their relatively high risk activities from sports and motorcycle riding and the whole 9 yards. So we see a little bit of an uptick in demand. At the same time, we're seeing a drop off in donations.
Is this year worse than other years in terms of being low in the summertime, or are we seeing, I don't want to say are we seeing the typical pattern, but I can't remember the last time I heard critically low. So I'm wondering if this year is particularly troublesome.
I would say not. I'd say this is more part of a pretty typical pattern for the summertime. And, we have a great community. Blood donors come out when we let them know that there's a need. And so that's why we love help getting that message out there, letting people know it's time to make an appointment. Come on in if it's time for you.
Well, it's definitely time for me. I'm overdue. In fact, I will share with you and all of our listeners that I went to the lab over the weekend to get some blood drawn for tests, and I had a rather long list. And after looking at all those vials, I thought, well, geez, I could have donated that. But it was also a reminder that it's been a while since I've donated. And so I want to make sure we address any pandemic concerns or anything else that people need to be thinking about if and when they would like to come donate.
Sure. Well, donating is just as easy as it's ever been. Since the pandemic, it's just as easy. We all wear masks so that each of us is protecting those around us. And we ask that donors also wear masks so that any exposures that either we know about or we don't get passed on. And we've not had any outbreaks of COVID in our donor arena. So we think with this much experience at this point, we can say confidently it's a safe experience relative to COVID. And most people can donate blood every 56 days.
And that brings up another question, because I can remember donating once years ago, and then like within a day after donating, developing a cold, and I had to call in and let the blood bank know. Is that I'm assuming that's a similar situation if somebody donates and then a couple of days later develops COVID symptoms?
It's absolutely the same. You're right. So anytime somebody gets some sort of acute illness, we do ask them to donate. I mean, to let us know if that's happening within a few days of their donation. And that's because we're just extra precautious, extra precautions. We don't want to, pass anything on if it might be contagious through a blood transfusion. Now, COVID is not spread through blood transfusions, so it's less of an issue than certain other conditions that a donor might let us know about, but we definitely want to hear about it. The other thing I think that's really important for donating blood in the summertime is that with the sunshine and a little bit warmer temperatures, we lose a lot more fluids than we realize. And so when we ask you to drink some extra fluid after a blood donation, that's a lot of extra fluid in the summertime. And I would typically recommend trying to get in a whole extra liter of fluid on the day of donation and the day after. And what that'll do is help you to not feel just kind of yucky. If you go outside and you're in the sunshine and you don't even notice it, but there's a little bit more perspiration and evaporation of water than until you just don't feel too great. So just keeping up on that fluids is super important in the summertime.
Good advice. So I want to back you up to what I mentioned earlier, the hospital capacity issue, because we're talking about Harborview, which is at 130% of capacity, people lined up in the hallways, which is unimaginable. Statewide, it's about 92%, and we know it's some of it is things that were backed up during the pandemic that people are now dealing with, and some of it is the summertime activities that we've talked about and that sort of thing. But what kind of effect does this high level of hospital census and capacity play on the blood supply?
In general, it has the same effect across the board. So like you're saying about all hospitals, the more that there are people there for illnesses that might require blood transfusion as part of the treatment plan, the more there is a draw on the blood supply. That's for sure. Harborview is sensitive in a particular way as a trauma center. Now, many patients come to Harborview with minor traumas or not needing transfusion for their particular issue, but it's also a center where people with major traumas go and end up needing many, many units of blood as part of their treatment plan, particularly in that immediate presentation. So the person who's been in a car accident or may have unfortunately been shot, they're coming in and potentially needing many units of blood within the first 2 hours.
Wow, that's an unnerving thought for a number of reasons, for sure. So, and you had mentioned, people that have been getting shot. Last few weekends we've seen, especially, has just been, I would describe it as almost like the Wild West in terms of the amount of gunfire and people hurt. And it sounds like that is really having an effect on the blood supply.
It certainly can. I spoke to Dr. Hess at Harborview this morning, and he said the victims taken as a whole or as a group over the weekend are sufficient if they had come all at once from one event to have been considered a mass casualty incident. As it turned out, they each came in of their own events, and not everybody needed blood, which was fortunate for both them and for the blood supply. But it keeps us on our toes and very watchful.
But is it actually making a real dent in the supply, like noticeably, measurably?
Do you mean over the last 2 weeks?
Or even the last several weeks, because we've seen so much of it consistently?
I would say that it's hard for us to pull that apart, specifically in terms of the blood supply. But what I can say is, despite all the people who are donating blood right now and working really hard to keep our blood supply up there, our blood supply has come down by several hundred units in the last few weeks. So, in as much as those trauma patients are part of that, they're definitely having an impact.
Okay, so then let's ask the most important question. What is it you need?
We need both whole blood and apheresis donations. Apheresis collections include a variety of components, but platelets are really critically important for us. We have a lot of patients in our community who need platelet transfusions, and very often those are cancer patients. And they need platelet transfusions because their treatment suppresses their own production. Without platelets, they have spontaneous bleeding episodes, and or if they need a medical procedure, they may bleed more than somebody who has a sufficient number of platelets. And so we need to make sure we have plenty of platelets to help those patients get through their treatments.
And I read the materials that were sent. Type O, always the big one, right?
Type O is really important. A little over 40% of the population is blood type O, either Rh positive or Rh negative. But it's the universal blood donor type. Everybody can receive a group O donation. So if you think about those patients showing up in emergency rooms who need a blood transfusion, before we even have time to test their blood type, we're going to give them a unit of group O because we know it's going to be compatible. So 40% of people, a little over 40% of us are O, but closer to 50% of patients who get transfused get a group O. So we need a lot of group O people donating blood.
Yeah, I tell you, my mother, before her cancer treatment and bone marrow transplant, was AB negative, which is pretty rare. They were constantly knocking on her door. Hey, can you come? And she was a surgical nurse to boot for 41
Yeah.
years. So they were constantly coming to her going, can you give us more of your little AB negative, which is, which is great because it was really easy for her. And speaking of how easy it is, let's talk about that. What do folks who want to donate need to do? Because it really isn't tough.
Yeah, the process is pretty straightforward. You give us your demographics so we can reach you. You answer the questionnaire, which can now be done online before you even show up. A staff person walks through some of the critical questions and just confirms your answers on that questionnaire, and then you donate. The actual donation takes maybe 15 minutes, and then you have a little rest period, start tanking up on those fluids, and you can go on your way. The whole process is probably not more than an hour.
And my personal favorite part, the cookies and the juice at the end. Always a nice
Yeah.
treat, right?
Yeah, definitely. And many of us do have such busy days. If you think about blood donation as a way to give yourself a little break afterwards to get those fluids going, have a little snack, and just chill out, cool your heels for a little bit, and then get on with the rest of your busy day. It's really easy to do.
And Bloodworks Northwest prefers people make an appointment, right?
Absolutely. It's one of our measures that we find helps keep things flowing and safe with COVID. It means we don't have a whole bunch of people crowded up because everybody decided to come in right now and just see if they could get in. You can make an appointment. Now, quite often you can make an appointment pretty quickly. So doesn't mean you have to wait. And if you can't find something that you want where you want today or tomorrow, it could be next week and the week after and any day, because we have this need every single day.
Good to know. And where can they find you on the web?
bloodworksnw.org.
And that's where people can go. They can make an appointment. They can fill out the questionnaire. All of it,
Yep.
bloodworksnw.org. All
Yep.
right. Dr. Kirsten Alcorn, thanks for that. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.